It began at 3:30 a.m. in the dead silence of the Indian Ocean, moonlight slicing through waves like silver blades, the air thick with humidity and tension. The U.S. Navy tanker USS Arlington Bay was running a quiet supply operation, refueling nearby destroyers as part of a convoy mission. The night was calm, routine, predictable, until the radar operator noticed something unusual: multiple fast-moving contacts closing in from the east. At first, they thought it was a glitch, maybe fishing vessels or local traffic. But as the blips multiplied, the truth sank in. There weren't just a few of them, there were dozens. Then, as the contacts began to form a wide encirclement pattern, the radar screen lit up like a constellation. "Sir," the young operator said, his voice tight with disbelief, "we've got at least 50 skiffs inbound." It wasn't 50. Moments later, infrared picked up over 250 pirate boats, speeding toward the tanker in a coordinated swarm. The crew on the Arlington Bay had seconds to process what was coming, the largest pirate attack since the early 2000s, and it was happening in real time. The order was immediate. "General quarters! All hands to battle stations!" Klaxons howled through the corridors as sailors scrambled. Deck lights dimmed to combat mode, red lights flickering over determined faces. The tanker's captain, Commander Harris, stood on the bridge, scanning the dark horizon. Through binoculars, he could already see silhouettes of small boats darting across the waves like angry insects. They were fast, improvised, and packed with armed men waving AK-47s and RPGs. But this wasn't 2009 anymore. The U.S. Navy had learned. The Arlington Bay wasn't alone. It carried a detachment of Marines. And its escort destroyer, USS Mason, was lurking just 15 nautical miles away, tracking the chaos via encrypted comms. The pirates came in shouting, firing tracer rounds into the night, trying to overwhelm the ship's defenses. But the Arlington Bay's phalanx CIWS system spun to life, its radar locking onto incoming boats. Within seconds, the night sky erupted in streams of red-hot tungsten rounds, ripping the sea apart. The first wave of pirate skiffs exploded into sprays of fire and water. Still, they kept coming. Hundreds of them. The pirates had no formation, but sheer numbers made up for it. They were attempting a swarm tactic, hit from all directions at once, overwhelm the crew, and board the ship by force. The Marines lined the rails, armed with M4 carbines and mounted M240 machine guns. Every few seconds, the sound of automatic gunfire mixed with the deep thud of grenade launchers. The ocean lit up with chaos, burning boats, shouting men, tracer fire carving across the waves like lightning. Then came the radio call from the Mason. "Arlington Bay, this is Guardian 1. We have visual confirmation. Engaging targets now." Out of the darkness, the destroyer appeared, a silhouette of steel and fury, its deck guns pivoting toward the swarm. Within moments, the 5-inch gun on the Mason opened fire, its shells slamming into the water, sending up geysers that flipped pirate boats like toys. The pirates panicked, splitting formation. But the U.S. Navy had been waiting for this. A P-8 Poseidon patrol aircraft had been monitoring the attack from above, feeding real-time data back to both ships. What followed was nothing short of surgical dominance. Flares streaked across the sky as the Poseidon dropped sonobuoys and illumination rounds, turning night into day. The pirates were now fully visible, every movement, every attempt to flank exposed. Commander Harris issued his next command with calm precision. "Deploy RHIB teams, take prisoners if possible." Small Navy boats were launched into the chaos, carrying heavily armed SEALs and Marines. They moved fast, cutting through burning debris, intercepting retreating pirate skiffs. For every pirate who tried to escape, the Navy's night vision scopes tracked him. The fight turned from a desperate defense into an organized takedown. By 5 a.m., the horizon was filled with drifting wreckage and smoke. The rising sun revealed the aftermath: over 100 pirate boats destroyed or disabled, dozens more surrendering. The sea was littered with floating debris and men clinging to what was left of their vessels. But even as the main battle subsided, something unexpected happened. From the command deck of the Arlington Bay, sonar picked up a faint, submerged signature. It wasn't a whale. It wasn't a civilian ship. It was moving too deliberately. "Contact underwater," the sonar officer reported, his voice uneasy. "Bearing 145 degrees, depth 120 meters, approaching slow." Commander Harris frowned. Pirates didn't have submarines. He turned toward his executive officer. "If that's what I think it is, we're not just dealing with pirates anymore." The XO nodded grimly. "Sir, it could be something else. Someone else." The radar flickered again, new pings. Not small boats this time. Something bigger, heavier, coming from the north. The Mason radioed back, its voice sharp. "Arlington Bay, we're detecting multiple radar returns. Unknown vessels approaching at 30 knots. No transponders. This might not be over." Commander Harris stared at the horizon as the first light of dawn broke across the sea. He tightened his grip on the rail. "Then let's find out who's behind this." The deck fell silent except for the faint hum of the engines and the crackle of the radio. Because everyone aboard knew, the pirate attack might have been just a distraction. Something bigger was coming. The radio room was now alive with static and urgent chatter. Sonar officers worked double time, headphones pressed tight, trying to distinguish the faint hum beneath the waves. The unknown contact was getting closer, too steady, too deliberate to be random ocean noise. "Contact bearing 145, closing fast. Estimate 12 nautical miles," came the voice from sonar control. Commander Harris stepped toward the digital map on the bridge wall. Blue dots marked friendly ships. The red ones, new, untagged, were starting to fill the screen. "Can we get a classification?" he asked. The sonar chief hesitated. "Sir, the frequency signature isn't pirate equipment. It's too refined. Could be a diesel-electric sub, possibly Chinese or Iranian make." The bridge fell silent for a moment. Pirates didn't work with submarines, but a state actor could. "Sir," said the communications officer, "Mason's radar confirms 3 large vessels inbound. No IFF signal. Likely motherships for the pirates, or someone testing our response time," Harris interrupted. He wasn't wrong. The battle with the pirates had been chaos. But now, this was controlled, calculated. A swarm of pirates attacking a high-value U.S. Navy tanker? It could have been a diversion all along, a probe to see how fast the Navy could react. "Alert the Mason," Harris ordered. "Tell them to form a defensive screen, no weapons free unless fired upon." As the message went out, the horizon began to glow faintly with dawn light, and shapes began to appear through the haze. 3 massive silhouettes. Converted cargo ships, flying no flags. Their decks bristled with radar masts and what looked disturbingly like drone launch pads. The USS Mason adjusted its course to intercept, its deck gun rotating toward the new threat. A pair of MH-60R Seahawk helicopters lifted off from its flight deck, their rotors whipping the early morning air. "Guardian 1 to Arlington Bay," came the pilot's voice over comms. "We're going in for a visual sweep. Stand by for contact report." The helicopters darted low over the water, tracing the silhouettes. From the air, it was clear. These weren't simple pirate support ships. Each vessel had unidentified drones being prepped on deck, men in tactical uniforms moving with precision, not the ragtag look of pirates. "Sir," the Seahawk pilot said, voice tense, "we're seeing organized crews. Military-grade equipment. Those aren't pirates, they're operators." Before Commander Harris could respond, one of the cargo ships launched a small reconnaissance drone, straight toward the Seahawk. "Evasive maneuvers!" the pilot yelled. The Navy helicopter banked hard as the drone zipped past, narrowly missing its tail rotor. That was it. The line was crossed. "Guardian 1 has been engaged," came the radio call. "Repeat, we are under attack." On the Mason, alarms blared. The destroyer's Aegis system locked onto the unidentified vessels. Within seconds, defensive missile batteries armed and ready. "Captain," the Mason CO radioed, "we have confirmed hostile intent. Permission to engage?" Commander Harris looked at his radar one more time. The 3 hostile ships were now spreading out, deploying smaller fast boats, similar to the pirate skiffs earlier, but faster and better equipped. The realization hit him like a punch. The pirate attack wasn't just bait. It was cover for something far larger and more organized. "Engage with warning shots only," he ordered. "Let's make them blink first." The Mason's deck gun thundered, launching a 5-inch warning shell across the bow of the lead vessel. The explosion sent up a towering column of seawater. For a few tense seconds, nothing happened. Then, chaos. The unidentified ships returned fire, not missiles, but swarms of attack drones. Tiny black dots streaked through the sky, homing in on the Mason and Arlington Bay. Within seconds, the destroyer's CIWS systems roared to life, spitting out thousands of rounds. Tracers lit up the dawn sky like a storm of fireflies. "Multiple inbound drones! Close-in defense active!" shouted the weapons officer. The U.S. Navy's electronic warfare systems kicked in. Jammers crackled to life, scrambling drone signals mid-air. Some veered off and crashed into the sea, but others made it through. One drone slammed into the Mason's aft deck, exploding in a fiery blast. The ship rocked, alarms screaming. "Damage control teams aft section, contain the fire!" the XO barked. Back on the Arlington Bay, Marines lined the railings again, ready for the fast boats that were now racing toward them. The pirates, or whoever they were back, armed and emboldened, using the chaos to close in. Tracer fire ripped across the water. The battle reignited, but this time it wasn't just pirates with rifles. The attackers were using guided launchers, night optics, and encrypted radios. This was no longer a simple hijacking attempt. Commander Harris turned to his tactical officer. "Get me satellite uplink. I want confirmation. Who's behind this?" Within moments, the feed connected. Intelligence analysts back at CENTCOM began cross-referencing radar signatures and drone frequencies. The response came fast. "Arlington Bay, be advised. We've matched drone telemetry. These units trace back to a contractor linked to a rogue state militia operating out of the Horn of Africa. You're not just fighting pirates. This is a proxy test." Harris exhaled slowly. They wanted to see if we'd hold fire, if we'd hesitate. The Mason's guns thundered again, dropping 2 fast boats in flames. The skies were filled with the roar of engines, the crack of gunfire, and the distant rumble of thunder rolling over the horizon. But Harris knew this was far from over. Because on the edge of the radar, just appearing now, were 2 unidentified aircraft heading straight toward the battle zone from the west. "Sir," the radar operator said quietly, "these aren't commercial flights. They're flying low and fast. Looks like—" He didn't finish. The radio burst alive with static and a distant voice, metallic, distorted, but unmistakably clear. "American vessels, you are in violation of restricted waters. Disengage immediately." The bridge fell silent again. Commander Harris looked up, his jaw tight. "That's not pirates," he said quietly. "That's someone trying to send a message." He turned toward the communications officer. "Patch me through to Fleet Command. Tell them the Indian Ocean just changed." The bridge went dim except for the glow of consoles and the red combat lights. The room was tense, the air thick with the weight of the unknown. Commander Harris leaned over the comms console as the encrypted uplink stabilized. "Fleet Command, this is Arlington Bay Actual," he said, his voice steady but hard. "We are in engagement with multiple unidentified surface contacts and 2 low-flying aircraft bearing west by northwest. Request immediate confirmation on hostile intent." There was a brief crackle. Then the calm but clipped voice of a fleet controller from Bahrain came through. "Arlington Bay, we are tracking the situation. AWACS support is en route. Estimated arrival time, 35 minutes. Until then, maintain defensive posture and avoid escalation." 35 minutes. That might as well have been a lifetime. Outside, the night had given way to a dark gray dawn, the horizon lit by the orange glow of burning boats. The Mason continued circling like a predator, its radars sweeping for any sign of new threats. The first aircraft, a twin-engine model flying low over the waves, broke radar silence, dipping toward the tankers at a dangerous angle. "Visual confirmation," the lookout shouted. "Looks like a strike drone, possibly Chinese manufacture, modified export model." Harris's brow furrowed. That didn't make sense. Chinese-made drones in pirate hands? No, this was coordinated. Somebody had armed the pirates, tested their logistics, and was now pushing the envelope to see just how far they could go before the U.S. would escalate. CIWS tracking target, the weapons officer called out. No lock yet, but it's painting us. Hold your fire, Harris ordered quietly. Let it make the first mistake. Seconds stretched into an eternity. The drone buzzed closer, its profile growing larger on the horizon. Then it dropped lower, too low, and released a small payload that splashed harmlessly into the water. A test drop, measuring reaction time. Sir, that was a dry run, said the XO. They're testing us, measuring radar response and defensive positioning. I know, Harris muttered, and someone's watching. He was right. High above, a faint contrail curved through the morning sky. A reconnaissance aircraft, likely gathering data. Whoever was behind this operation wasn't trying to sink ships. They were studying American response patterns, timing radar locks, intercept speeds, communication delays. Fleet Command, Harris said into his mic. We've confirmed a coordinated probe, not a random engagement. Recommend escalation readiness and electronic warfare deployment. Before Command could reply, the Mason's radar alarm shrieked again. New contact, high altitude, inbound fast, bearing 095. A long pause. Then the tactical officer's voice broke through. Possible anti-ship missile launch detection. That snapped everyone into motion. Activate CRAM, all countermeasures live, Harris barked. The destroyer's CRAM launcher pivoted, locking on to the distant threat. The radar cross-section was small, likely a cruise missile, or a drone mimicking one. Alarms howled across both ships as flares burst into the air. Seconds later, the missile streaked past, missing by less than half a kilometer, its trail carving across the waves before exploding harmlessly beyond visual range. The room erupted with sound. Men shouting coordinates, metal creaking under pressure, the low hum of defense systems whirring back to standby. Fleet Command to Arlington Bay. Confirmed no direct strike. Signal jam analysis shows triangulation consistent with coastal jamming stations in Yemen or Djibouti. You're in a contested corridor. So that was it. Someone had set a trap. Pirates as bait, drones as cover, and a live fire test to gauge the U.S. Navy's readiness along one of the world's busiest shipping routes. The XO turned toward Harris. Sir, if those aircraft were launched from a foreign-controlled base, we're looking at a proxy escalation, not independent action. Harris stared out the window toward the rising sun. Then whoever's running this wants us to make the first mistake. The radio crackled again, this time from the Mason. Guardian Actual to Arlington Bay, we're picking up a transmission on a local civilian frequency. It's encrypted, but the source is moving, fast. Could be a command vessel coordinating the attacks. Harris's eyes narrowed. Get a fix on it. Moments later, sonar reported a faint ping, a submerged contact again, but this time much closer. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Depth charge ready, one officer muttered. Negative, Harris said sharply. We're not provoking anyone. Let's flush them out instead. He turned toward the electronic warfare specialist. Deploy the decoy sonar boys. I want them to think we're moving east. Within minutes, a line of sonar buoys splashed into the water, mimicking the tanker's engine signature. The contact turned toward them, exactly as planned. Got him, said the sonar chief. They took the bait. Harris smiled grimly. Now, let's see who they are. The Mason's helicopter, call sign Viper 2, swooped in low with a dipping sonar array. The water churned, the sensors scanning. For a moment, there was only static. Then a faint metallic signature came through. The operator leaned forward. Sir, we've got an ID. Submarine hull trace matches a foreign-manufactured Type 039A, Chinese export, operated under a local militia contract. The bridge fell silent. Harris exhaled slowly. So it's confirmed. This wasn't pirates. It's a shadow operation, testing NATO patrol patterns through proxy forces. He tapped the comms. Send all intel to Fleet Command and CENTCOM. This goes to the top. But before the transmission could complete, the communications console suddenly blinked out. Static flooded the speakers. "Sir," the comms officer said, alarmed, "we're being jammed. Wideband interference. Satellite uplink just went down." The XO glanced up, pale. If they're jamming us now, then they're preparing for the next phase. Harris stepped toward the window, eyes locked on the burning horizon. "Then we hold this line," he said, "until we know exactly who's trying to light it." The low hum of engines deepened as both ships turned to face the oncoming signals. The sea was quiet now. Too quiet. The last of the pirate wreckage drifted by as the radar screen pulsed again, showing new inbound aircraft, unidentified, approaching fast. "Sir," the radar officer said, "they're not responding to any hails. No transponders, no IFF. Speed 600 knots closing in." Commander Harris adjusted his headset, his voice calm but iron-edged. "Then it looks like round 2 just arrived." The entire crew braced as the early sunlight glinted off the wings of the approaching aircraft. Whatever was coming next, it was no longer a skirmish. It was a test of control in open waters. The horizon vibrated with the low, distant roar of jet engines. The radar officer's voice cut through the tension. "Multiple aircraft confirmed, 3, maybe 4. They're fast movers, low altitude. Looks like attack drones or strike fighters on recon approach." Commander Harris didn't blink. "Any visual ID yet?" "Negative, sir. Too far out, but radar cross-section suggests subsonic drones with stealth shaping. Could be modified wing lungs or a variant of the CH-5. Chinese-built export drones again. Someone wanted to stay just outside the lines of attribution." "Bring our jammers online," Harris said. "Full electronic defense posture. Mason will engage at range. We'll keep countermeasures ready." The Mason's combat systems officer acknowledged the order over encrypted comms. "Guardian to Arlington activating EW suite. If they're testing us, they're about to get their data corrupted." Outside, the air shimmered with heat. The morning sun was climbing now, gleaming off the ocean like molten glass. The surviving pirate skiffs had long since vanished or been sunk, but the battle space was far from empty. One of the incoming drones dropped altitude, sweeping over the burning debris field as if collecting footage. Then another split off and began circling the Arlington Bay. The phalanx guns tracked them automatically, the spinning barrels whirring but not yet firing. Harris raised his binoculars. Through the haze, he could just make out the smooth, insect-like shape of the drone. White fuselage, no markings, and a faint red light blinking under the nose. "Sir," said the weapons officer, "it's scanning us with LiDAR. That's a targeting sequence." Harris lowered the binoculars. "Not anymore. Neutralize it." The command came out flat, controlled. The Mason's 25mm autocannon thundered, and the drone disintegrated in midair, a burst of flame and metal fragments raining into the sea. But almost instantly, 2 more signatures appeared on radar, closing from opposite directions. "They're flanking!" the XO shouted. "Launch decoy chaff and prep counter-drone missiles," Harris ordered. Streams of metallic chaff exploded from the destroyer's deck, blooming across the sky like silver clouds. The radar signatures scrambled, one drone diving straight into the ocean, fooled by false reflections. The other broke off and began broadcasting wide-band jamming noise, its signal cutting through comms frequencies like a blade. "Sir, interference rising. We're losing GPS lock." "Switch to inertial navigation. Maintain combat link through local line of sight." Even as the crew scrambled to re-establish communication, the sonar operator spoke up again. "Captain, new contact. That submarine's back on the scope. It's maneuvering behind us." Harris turned sharply. "Distance?" 4,000 yards and closing. Depth 90 meters. "Deploy counter-sub-drones, passive tracking only." Moments later, 2 small Navy underwater drones slipped into the water from the ship's stern. Their sensors blinked to life, sonar arrays painting a clear image of the depths below. The return feed was chilling, a dark shape sliding silently through the thermocline, nose pointed directly at the Arlington Bay. "They've got torpedo tubes open," the sonar chief whispered. "I'm reading active ballast changes, possible firing prep." "Guardian," "This is Arlington Bay," Harris said into his comms. "We have a submerged hostile preparing to engage. Recommend immediate ASROC readiness." "Copy that," came the Mason's reply. "Locking target." The destroyer's deck shook as its ASROC anti-submarine rocket launched into the air, arcing across the waves before plunging into the ocean. The explosion came seconds later, deep, muffled, followed by a tremor that rippled across the surface. "Hit confirmed," sonar reported. "But, wait, sir, there's movement. It's still alive." On the tactical display, the submarine's signature split in two. Decoys. They were using underwater drones as countermeasures. "Clever," Harris muttered. "They're testing how we track decoy signatures, too." He could almost feel the pattern now. Every move, every escalation, deliberate but restrained. No one wanted a direct confrontation. It was an exercise in provocation, meant to measure U.S. resolve without crossing the threshold into open war. But then came the shift. The radar operator stiffened. "Sir, new heat blooms. 6 more drones launching from the unidentified vessels. These are armed. Repeat, armed." That was it. No more hesitation. "Engage all hostiles," Harris said. "Weapons free." The Mason's CIWS spun up with a scream. Streams of tracers tore across the sky, cutting down the first 3 drones before they could even align. The remaining ones released small missiles, smart, evasive, agile. 2 streaked toward the Arlington Bay, skimming just above the waves. "Brace!" The first missile exploded in a brilliant plume, deflected by countermeasures. The second struck the tanker's outer hull, not a direct hit, but enough to send shockwaves through the ship. Men were thrown off balance, alarms blared, and smoke filled the lower decks. "Damage report!" Harris yelled. "Minor hull breach, port side. No critical systems compromised. Fire control engaged. Keep pressure on those launch ships. I want them disabled, not sunk." The Mason adjusted course, bringing its main gun to bear. Precision rounds thundered across the water, striking near the lead mothership. The vessel shuddered, smoke pouring from its midsection. Small figures could be seen leaping overboard. "Hit confirmed. Target disabled." But the second ship was already retreating, broadcasting encrypted data bursts toward the horizon. "They're transmitting combat telemetry," the signals officer said grimly. "Everything we've done, they're sending it somewhere." "To who?" the XO asked. "Whoever's paying attention," Harris replied. The final drone swept over the battlefield, streaming live footage of the burning sea, the crippled pirate vessels, and the U.S. ships locked in combat readiness. Then it turned and raced north, vanishing into the clouds. "Sir," said the communications officer, "we just regained satellite uplink. Fleet command is online." Harris took a slow breath before responding. "Tell them this wasn't piracy. It was a rehearsal. Someone just ran a live simulation of asymmetric naval warfare against us." The deck was still vibrating from the last explosion, the sea littered with debris and smoke. The dawn sky glowed red-orange, painted by the rising sun and the aftermath of battle. "Sir," the XO said softly, "what do we do now?" Harris looked at the radar, at the empty space where the last contacts had been. Then he turned toward his crew. "We stay alert," he said, "because this wasn't the war." He paused, eyes narrowing at the horizon. This was the preview. The wind howled across the deck, carrying the smell of fuel and salt and smoke. Somewhere beyond the horizon, satellites were already downloading the footage, analysts in silent rooms dissecting every second of America's response. And far away, in another time zone, someone watching that feed would lean back in their chair and smile, because the test had gone exactly as planned. Within hours, the entire incident had been flagged under Operation Deep Signal, a joint task force effort between U.S. Naval Intelligence, ONI, the National Security Agency, and the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA. The Arlington Bay and USS Mason were ordered to maintain station in the Gulf of Aden until relief ships arrived. But the real war was shifting, from the sea to encrypted data streams bouncing through satellites and fiber cables. Inside the Combat Information Center aboard the Mason, The air smelled of ozone and burnt electronics. The crew worked quietly, collecting terabytes of sensor logs, acoustic recordings, and electromagnetic data. Every sonar ping, every radar return, every drone transmission, all packaged and transmitted to Maryland for analysis. "Sir," said Lieutenant Rogers, the ship's intelligence officer, eyes locked on a scrolling data screen. "We've cracked the source of those encrypted drone signals." Harris turned. "Talk to me." "They're routing through relay nodes in Eritrea and Djibouti. But here's the thing." Rogers paused, zooming in on a data trace. The end server is spoofed as a civilian logistics hub. Underneath that, it's linked to Beidou, China's satellite navigation network. A heavy silence filled the room. "Meaning this wasn't random tech scavenged by pirates," the XO said. "They were being guided, tracked, fed live targeting data." "Exactly," Rogers replied. "The pirates weren't alone. They were being used as a field test to evaluate real-time response capability of U.S. naval forces in constrained waters." "By China," Harris said flatly. Rogers nodded. "Indirectly, yes. The tech signatures match modified Wing Lung 2 drones, export versions. But they were networked into a command chain we've never seen before. Distributed control, redundant uplinks, autonomous failover. That's not pirate tech. That's military-grade AI-assisted coordination." Harris exhaled, leaning over the digital chart. "So, the attack wasn't about the cargo or ransom. It was data harvesting, reaction time, threat prioritization, comms integrity. And how your task force handled multi-domain interference," Rogers added. "They wanted to see what we do when hit simultaneously from air, surface, and subsurface." Harris stared at the glowing red traces on the map. The puzzle pieces were clicking together, and the picture was not good. "Sir," came another voice from the communications station. "Fleet Command confirms satellite imagery shows 2 Chinese Type 054 frigates positioned 70 miles north during the engagement. They never came closer, but they maintained passive radar sweeps the entire time." Silent observers, watching, recording. Harris's jaw tightened. So they let the pirates do the dirty work, while they collected performance metrics from a distance. "Looks that way, sir," the XO replied. "And now they've got a clean read on our EW and sonar patterns." In the background, the ship's crew continued their work. The sound of printers, encrypted bursts over the comms net, and the faint hum of the engines filled the space. Then the internal phone rang. Harris picked it up. "This is Commander Harris." A clipped, firm voice answered. "Commander, this is Rear Admiral Kearns, Joint Task Force Operations. We've reviewed your situation report. Stand by for orders, and understand that what happened tonight did not occur in the official record. You will transfer all combat data to Fleet Command immediately. Nothing leaves that ship without clearance." "Yes, sir. But if I may?" "You may not," Kearns interrupted. "We'll handle the diplomatic side. You just keep your men quiet and your systems locked down. We can't afford headlines right now." The line clicked dead. Harris slowly lowered the receiver, staring at the map. "They're burying it," he muttered. Rogers looked up from his console. "Sir? They don't want anyone knowing we just fought a proxy test run. It'll be labeled pirate aggression, routine engagement, minimal damage." The XO frowned. "But we both know it wasn't that." "Yeah," Harris said, eyes fixed on the horizon, "and so do they." Outside, the ocean stretched endlessly, deceptively calm. A U.S. Navy reconnaissance drone circled high above, watching the waves for any lingering threats. But for the first time in his career, Harris knew the real danger wasn't to the enemy he could see. It was the shadow behind the signal. Later that evening, as darkness fell again over the Gulf, Rogers entered the captain's quarters with a classified packet. "Sir, data analysis came in from Fort Meade," he said quietly. "There's something you should see." He placed a small tablet on the desk. The screen displayed a pattern, 3 red dots arranged in a triangle. The timestamp and geolocation were from the engagement, logged moments before the first pirate vessel appeared. "Those dots," Rogers continued, "match signal patterns from previous encounters near the South China Sea, and one off the coast of Taiwan last month. Identical triangulation intervals. It's a coordinated system. Harris frowned. What's it mean? Rogers hesitated. It means this wasn't the first time they ran this play, and it won't be the last. A long silence followed. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the ship's hull. The ocean whispered beneath the steel decks like something alive, waiting. Send everything to Oni, Harris said finally. And Rogers, make sure a copy of that data survives whatever Fleet Command tries to erase. Rogers nodded, a grim understanding passing between them, because somewhere out there, beneath the waves or beyond the clouds, someone was already planning the next rehearsal, and the next one might not end with restraint. 3 days later, in a secure room deep beneath the Pentagon, a small group of senior officials, intelligence analysts, and military officers gathered behind closed doors. The walls were soundproof, the phones confiscated, and the digital recorders disabled. At the center of the table sat Rear Admiral Kearns, the same voice Harris had heard over the encrypted line. Across from him were representatives from the NSA, CIA, and Office of Naval Intelligence. On the wall, a screen displayed still frames from the Arlington Bay engagement, thermal footage of the pirate swarm, radar sweeps, and satellite images of 2 Chinese frigates that had quietly shadowed the operation from afar. This was never about pirates, Kearns began, his voice low but sharp. It was a full-scale simulation disguised as an attack. Someone wanted to see how far we'd go before escalation. The Oni analyst, a young woman in a Navy suit, pointed to a digital chart. The pirates were proxies. Their equipment came through shell companies in Oman and Yemen, all financed through offshore accounts linked to front organizations in Guangzhou. They weren't working for China, but they were definitely being fed by them. The CIA liaison leaned forward. So Beijing tests our fleet's reaction time in international waters without firing a single official shot. Plausible deniability, no direct confrontation. Kearns nodded grimly. And they succeeded. We lost nothing, but they gained everything. Full spectrum telemetry of our radar frequencies, EW response, communications hierarchy, all without crossing the line into open war. He turned to the screen showing Commander Harris's after-action report. The Arlington Bay crew held the line under impossible odds, but this incident marks a shift. The next time it won't be a swarm of pirates, it'll be state-flagged vessels. There was silence for a long moment. Then the DIA representative spoke. We've seen this pattern before. South China Sea, the Philippine Trench, now the Gulf of Aden. They're mapping our command structure globally, testing latency, testing doctrine. Kearns exhaled slowly. And we're going to test back. He stood and walked to the windowless wall, tapping a digital console. The screen changed to a world map dotted with red and blue markers. Starting tomorrow, the Navy AS Carrier Strike Group 12 will reposition to the Pacific Theater under the guise of joint exercises. P-8 patrols will expand into the South China Sea, and every future encounter, no matter how small, will be logged through black channels only. The CIA officer raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Meaning? Kearns said, his voice dropping to a cold whisper. We stop playing defense. He turned to the others. The next test won't come from them. It'll come from us. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, in a dimly lit command center outside Hainan Island, a Chinese naval officer studied the same engagement from the other side. His display showed the wreckage of the pirate boats, the drone telemetry, and the encrypted fragments of American radar. He smiled faintly. Successful test, he said in Mandarin. They reacted faster than expected, but still within our prediction window. Behind him, a senior PLA admiral clasped his hands behind his back. Prepare the next phase, he ordered. Different sea, same method. Let's see how far the Americans are willing to chase a ghost. As the screens flickered with new coordinates, somewhere near the Strait of Malacca, the admiral turned to leave. Outside, dawn broke over the naval base, glinting off rows of destroyers and submarines quietly waiting for orders. In Washington, the same dawn painted the Potomac River gold. Commander Harris stood at the deck of his ship, finally cleared for port, watching the sunlight shimmer across the water. The sea was calm again, but the stillness no longer brought peace. He knew now that this was how modern wars began, not with declarations or invasions, but with data, deniability, and deception. The first shots weren't fired by missiles, but by signals. And somewhere, on both sides of the ocean, men were already preparing for the next invisible battle. Because the war hadn't ended that night at 3:30 a.m., it had only just begun.